The liberation of Europe in 1944 and 1945 saw air power applied to a land campaign with an efficiency never before possible. From the invasion of Normandy in June 1944 to the final assault on Germany's heartland in 1945, Allied forces were preceded and supported by an air campaign of stunning efficiency, working under an umbrella of air superiority provided by US Army Air Force and Royal Air Force fighters. Ground attack aircraft hammered German forces in France. They attacked panzer formations, trying to throw back the landings, cutting rail and road networks to stop Wehrmacht reinforcements. On a wider scale, they smashed any moving or inadequately camouflaged military targets spread over a huge area. Allied air superiority translated into an intense air-to-ground campaign which stretched hundreds of kilometers ahead of the rapidly advancing Allied armies. Although many of the fighters and fighter bombers were tasked with providing close support to the troops on the ground, swarms of them were free to rove the skies over northwest Europe. They bombed, rocketed and strafed targets of opportunity. Anything moving by day was fair game, and it became almost impossible for the Germans to reinforce their troops at the front. As the Allies pushed on to liberate France and Belgium, air power continued to be employed to great effect, drawing in what was left of the Luftwaffe in a battle they could not win. And when the Allies made the final effort to assault the German heartland itself, they did so with the support of key Allied warplanes. For the invasion of Normandy, codenamed Operation Overlord, the Allies had organized the biggest aerial armada ever seen in history. During the briefing for Overlord, General Eisenhower told his troops, "Don't worry about the aircraft overhead, they'll be ours." He was right. The Allied Expeditionary Air Force had nearly 250 squadrons of combat aircraft. These were mainly fighters and fighter bombers, but included 60 squadrons of light and medium bombers. They were backed up by 70 squadrons of transport aircraft and some 50 other support squadrons. Further support from combat aircraft came from the might of the US 8th Air Force and RAF Bomber Command with their heavy bombers and fighters. In all, the Allies could count on 13,000 aircraft to support the invasion. Over 2 million men and nearly 4,000 ships were also committed. The tough and hard-hitting Typhoon proved itself in combat as Britain's premier fighter bomber of World War II. With its heavy armament of 4 20mm cannon, rockets and bombs, the Typhoon was one of the most deadly tank busters of the war. At first, it was plagued by early development problems. In spite of these, it had a superb low-level performance. When it entered service, it was the only fighter fast enough to catch the new FW-190. In combat, the Typhoon was used as a form of powerful, accurate and highly mobile airborne artillery. The punch from its 8 rockets was equivalent to a broadside from a cruiser. In Normandy, Typhoons operated cab rank patrols, orbiting fully armed above the battlefield. The leaders were in touch with experienced fighter controllers on the ground. Being confronted by an enemy tank or gun position, the controller would identify the target and call down the Typhoons to engage. The immortal Spitfire was Britain's main fighter of World War II. The victor of the Battle of Britain had continued to be developed. Merlin-engine Spitfires were joined by the first Griffon-engine Mark 12s in early 1943. For the Normandy landings, the versatile Spitfire flew a wide range of missions, from interception and fighter bombing to reconnaissance. During the strategic daylight bombing campaign against Germany, the US Army Air Force relied on 3 fighters to provide escort for its lumbering heavy bombers. They were the P-38 Lightning, the P-47 Thunderbolt, and the P-51 Mustang. All possessed superb long-range performance for escorting bombers deep into the heart of the Reich. And when the defending German fighters came to attack, the little friends would pounce and carry the fight back to the Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. As the tide of the war turned in favor of the bombers, the escort fighters were released from their purely defensive role and allowed to range freely across northern Europe. They became equally deadly in their newfound ground attack role. They shot up every German installation in sight. When they weren't doing this, they went off to Germany itself to beat the Luftwaffe on its own doorstep. The twin-tail P-38 Lightning was nicknamed the Fork-tailed Devil. During one train-busting mission alone, 80 miles west of Berlin, 42 Lightnings of the 20th Fighter Group destroyed 18 German locomotives, 50 rail wagons, as well as 16 Bf-109 fighters. The P-47 was nicknamed the Jug, short for Juggernaut, because of its huge size. Armed primarily with 6 machine guns for air combat, it could also haul 2 1,000-pound bombs. In the ground attack role, the P-47 excelled as a tank buster. Soft-skinned targets like parked aircraft, trains and trucks could be destroyed by machine gun fire, but targets such as buildings or bridges needed to be bombed. The P-47 was not a purpose-built dive bomber, so new techniques were evolved for getting weapons on target. Pilots found that releasing bombs at 5,000 meters in a shallow dive proved to be effective at knocking out bridges and heavier targets. The Mustang was arguably the best fighter of World War II. Long range, coupled with superb performance and maneuverability, made it the ideal escort fighter. In air combat, with defending Luftwaffe fighters, it racked up a kill ratio of over 10-to-1. As the Normandy invasion drew near, the Mustang increasingly turned its attention to tactical bombing and ground attack. And it was not just in US hands that the Mustang was such a deadly machine. The 6 Mustang Mark III squadrons of the Royal Air Force were among the most successful of the 2nd Tactical Air Force fighter units. Pitched air battles, they shot down scores of Bf-109Gs and FW-190s in the Dreux sector. By the end of April 1944, fighter sweeps across Western Europe were meeting little German resistance. Bigger, more ambitious operations were planned. On the 20th of May, 1,200 American and British fighters and fighter bombers fanned out across France and Western Germany looking for targets of opportunity. They found hundreds of them. The tactical bombing program that had been set in motion in the run-up to the invasion was increased in scope as soon as there were Allied soldiers on the ground in France. As the requirement for ground support increased, the United States Air Force and the Royal Air Force developed the capacity to take care of it, and the emphasis changed to include other types of aircraft. One of the most important of these was the Douglas DB-7. It was known as the A-20 Havoc to the Americans and the Boston to the British. Developed as a 3-seat light attack bomber, the A-20 was one of the most versatile aircraft of World War II. It flew a wide range of challenging missions. With a top speed of 550 kilometers per hour, the Havoc was a hot ship. It was faster and more complex than contemporary European bombers. It was used primarily as a light-medium bomber for attacks on fixed battlefield targets like forward enemy airfields, landing grounds, roads, rail networks and bridges. In the process, the A-20 amassed a combat record second to none. RAF Bostons were much in evidence during cross-channel operations in 1943 and 1944. Bostons from number 342 Squadron, Lorraine, were the first French-flown aircraft to operate from French soil after D-Day. By far the most important variant of the Havoc was the A-20G. Earlier models had a glass nose for the bomb aimer's position, but the G model introduced a solid nose packed with the devastating forward-firing gun armament of 8 50 caliber heavy machine guns. An alternative fit was 2 50s and 4 20mm cannons. The bomb load was doubled to nearly 2 tons. The A-20G proved to be a tough and potent ground attacker in Europe. Like the Havoc, the Douglas Invader was also an effective United States Air Force 3-seat light-medium bomber. The A-26 was heavily armed like the Havoc, but it was even faster. As well as a 2-ton bomb load, the A-26 had 6, later 8 guns in the nose, plus 4 more in 2 turrets. It could also carry a further 8 machine guns in underwing pods. The Martin Marauder was a 5-seat light-medium bomber. In service with the US 8th Air Force since mid-1943, it could carry half its weight in bombs over short distances. The B-26's high performance came initially at a price. Many crews were lost due to their inexperience in handling such a hot ship. But the early troubles of the Widowmaker were ironed out, and the Marauder became one of the most potent Allied bombers. Britain's finest light bomber of World War II was the de Havilland Mosquito. Made almost entirely of wood, the Mosquito was arguably the most versatile aircraft of the war. It flew all kinds of missions: bomber, reconnaissance fighter, night fighter, pathfinder, just to name a few. Nicknamed the Wooden Wonder, the Mosquito was the fastest bomber of the war with a top speed of nearly 600 kilometers per hour. It was also formidably armed. The fighter bomber version had 4 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns, plus 900 kilograms of bombs, or 450 kilograms of bombs and 8 rocket projectiles. Mosquitoes excelled as precision bombers. Among the most spectacular missions were the attacks against the Gestapo headquarters in Denmark and the prison-busting raid to free French resistance fighters at Amiens. The Normandy landings saw the heaviest use in history of airborne assault forces. These were landed in 2 ways, by parachute and by glider. Dropped from hundreds of Douglas C-47 Skytrain and Dakota transports, thousands of paratroops attacked German positions with maximum surprise. Troops also went directly into battle from British Horsa and Hadrian gliders. These were towed by Stirling, Halifax and Albemarle bombers. Each Horsa could carry 25 paratroops. Opposing the Allied fighters and bombers was the might of the Luftwaffe. Generally, pilots flew developments of well-proven designs, such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf FW-190. But joining them were a new generation of combat aircraft, including jet bombers and fighters, which were far more advanced than anything possessed by the Allies. These included the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet combat aircraft, and the Arado AR-234 jet bomber. But these last-ditch weapons were generally too few and came too late to have much impact on the war. Once the Allies had invaded Europe to liberate it from the yoke of Nazism, the outcome was inevitable. Air-to-surface weapons delivered by combat aircraft added a new dimension to mobile war, providing much more flexible fire support than artillery. The weapons delivered by Allied warplanes fell into three main categories. Machine guns varied in caliber from the 7.62mm weapon carried by some of the older British fighters through the heavier 12.7mm guns of the Americans. Heavier caliber weapons, usually 20mm cannon, rapidly became standard armament for the Royal Air Force. These were lethal to the unarmored vehicles of the German troop convoys. Bombs also varied in size, but the most effective and most commonly used in tactical warfare were the 500 and 1,000 pounders. Less accurate than guns or rockets, bombs were nevertheless much more destructive. High-explosive air-to-surface rockets were simple but phenomenally destructive. The Germans had just one more large surprise for the Allies. Unsuspected by British and American intelligence, the Luftwaffe had for some weeks been planning a great set-piece operation against the RAF and the American air bases in northern Europe. Some 800 fighters and fighter bombers of all types were drawn from units all over the Reich. The attack, codenamed Operation Bodenplatte, baseplate, was launched soon after first light on New Year's Day, 1945. The targets of the Luftwaffe aircraft were major Allied air bases in the Netherlands and Belgium. Surprise was almost universal as the strikes came in soon after 9 o'clock. Considerable damage was caused and about 500 Allied aircraft were destroyed or later scrapped. But after the defences had recovered from the shock, about 300 German aircraft were shot down or crashed on the way home. Whereas the Allies were able to replace their losses within a few days, relatively few aircrew were killed, the German losses, which included some 230 airmen, were little short of disastrous. Time was fast running out for the Third Reich. Tactical air support pressed hard on the heels of ground troops as the Allied armies continued their advance across northern Europe.
For 5 days, we flew sortie after sortie, strafing every road south, west, and east of the beaches. When nothing more was moving on the roads, we sprayed along the sides of the roads where we knew the Germans were hiding under cover, waiting for the dark when they could start to make their nighttime move. As soon as Allied fighters appeared overhead, the Germans would leave their vehicles and dive for safety in any protection they could find at the side of the road. They would shoot at us with their rifles and light machine guns. We were often flying into a cloud of small arms fire.
The instant we got within range of the guns, they started firing. We were getting light, heavy flak, and intense and accurate doses. The only evasive action we could take was a constant weaving, which at least made the ground move their guns, if nothing else. The A-20s in front of us were catching hell. With bombs gone, I made a steep diving turn and headed for the deck as fast as I could, weaving and bobbing to throw off their aim. As we turned away, we could see that we had hit the target squarely. At this time, we were too busy to feel elated over that. The airplane was a sieve.
It was to take the Allies almost 10 months to reach Germany, and then just another 2 before the end of the war itself. Allied bombers stepped up their huge strategic raids on the German industrial machine and on German cities themselves. The crossing of the Rhine heralded the final assault on the German Reich. It saw the most prolonged and concentrated use of air power in history. This paved the way for the liberation of Europe from the tyranny of Nazism.